Serious, what is a seemingly normal photo that has a disturbing backstory? The leading image on Franklin Delano Floyd's Wikipedia page, a father and his daughter posing for a family photo. In actuality, the little girl is Floyd's stepdaughter, Suzanne Marie Savakis, who he'd kidnapped around 1974, when Suzanne was under 10 years old. He would go on to raise her as his daughter, putting her through high school under several pseudonyms, then have a son with her, Indiana 19881, and marry her in 1989, under the name Tanya Hughes. By 1990, Tanya/Suzanne had decided to leave Floyd, and take her son, Michael, with her. In April of that year, she was found beaten and bruised on the side of a highway, and subsequently died in hospital. Michael went into foster care and was adopted by a loving family, only to be kidnapped by Floyd in 1994 and to never be seen again. Floyd was arrested in late 1994. The news about his late second wife being his kidnapped stepdaughter didn't come out until 2014. 1. Someone rightly pointed out that Michael is not Floyd's biological son. This was only discovered when DNA testing was performed as part of Michael's adoption in 1994, when he was 4 to 5 years old. Presumably, up until that point, Floyd had reason to believe he was the biological father. Photos of his were found that depicted sexual exploitation of Suzanne/Tanya from the age of 4. I actually have a black humor story about the nightclub fire. So I work in an OR and was at Rhode Island Hospital for a short while where I heard this story. Back in the day, the cafeteria had mostly black trays but some red trays. All the doctors knew it was considered bad luck to use a red tray. Well, the night of the fire, the on-call attending trauma surgeon decided to go with the residents to the cafe, and he picks up a red tray. The residents tell him it's bad luck and he shrugs and says, "What's the worst that can happen?" Within an hour all the pagers start going off with incoming patients from the fire. This story is legit. The Larimer County Coroner's Office said Thursday that the cause of death was drowning, but hypothermia was also a significant condition. According to the coroner's report, Naomi fell into the pond around 5 p.m. and was found sometime later. On Thursday, some questioned the pond's placement, which is a few yards down a sloped hill from the Loveland Sports Park playground. The pond is literally a couple steps from the playground. It is extremely difficult to watch multiple toddlers/preschoolers at that park, as there are pillars and other obstructions in the way of the view. I moved here 31.5 years ago, and have been saying that pond is a disaster waiting to happen since the beginning. It is a stupid place for a pond, an irresponsible place, a poorly thought out place, and a dangerous place. Such a tragedy, Tara Wilson wrote to the Coloradoan on Facebook. This photo of a scuba diver. What you're seeing is a normal photo of a scuba diver, but in the background you can see another diver behind them booking it for the ocean floor, and on the right-hand side of the image, there's a flat and strangely stiff figure, Tina Watson, about 100 feet underwater, unconscious or likely already dead. Tina was visiting Australia on her honeymoon with her new husband Gabe Watson, also a diver, who convinced her to get certified despite Tina being very nervous and uncomfortable underwater. During an open ocean dive that was far too advanced for her limited experience, Tina experienced an equipment malfunction and drowned. Her husband Gabe is, at best, an arrogant, incompetent, lying piece of shit who exaggerated his abilities as a certified rescue diver and was unable to save his wife when she began exhibiting signs of distress. At worst, he's a cold-blooded murderer who deliberately shut off her air supply until she passed out and then allowed her to drown. He gave 16 differing accounts of the incident, which occurred shortly after he requested that Tina make him her sole life insurance beneficiary. On the advice of her father, Tina didn't change her policy, but she told Gabe that she had. After being charged with Tina's murder, Gabe pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. His sentence was suspended after only 18 months. He is now back in Alabama. Whatever you believe happened beneath the surface, the photograph is chilling. I have such a huge problem with the infographic that claims that photo 499 is fake because the camera had recorded a fast shutter speed, and according to this person you would never use 1/1000 for shooting a person because making a person sharp takes time and slows the shutter speed down. That is absolutely not at all how cameras work. They also claimed that there were more focus points than there would be if the camera was focusing on a person rather than a landscape, but if you were shooting in landscape mode it would use focus points for landscape mode regardless if you were actually shooting a person. I don't know if the picture is real or not, but the proof this person provides to show the photo is faked is not proof at all. This person clearly doesn't understand how cameras work. That story is so bananas. After Chapman came back and killed him, he laid down next to his copy of Catcher in the Rye, fully expecting to be absorbed into the book. After he was arrested and the cops were asking him why he killed Lennon, he basically said, "I don't know." Edit: a few edits to what I said. He may have not laid down by his book, but he did expect to essentially become Holden Caulfield and would end up in The Catcher in the Rye. Also, he said he killed Lennon for a variety of reasons. He was Christian and Lennon said the Beatles were bigger than Jesus and imagine there's no heaven, thought he was a phony, wanted to become famous by killing someone famous, wanted to save the children by eliminating a bad influence, etc. But when he was arrested and sitting in the cop car, he was kind of in shock that the whole thing didn't go down as he expected and couldn't answer the question of why, as everyone was freaking out, and even said he was a Beatles fan afterwards. He was extremely mentally ill and constantly hallucinated tiny people that he would rule over and that he put in charge of his budget. He was also doing a bunch of acid. This photo always gets to me somehow. Just a couple of astronauts posing in zero gravity, happy to have such an incredible opportunity, like astronauts often do. Meanwhile, they have no idea that their space shuttle is irreparably damaged, and in fact will be dead in a few days during re-entry, which was considered safe until then. It's the crew for Columbia, for those who don't know, whose tiles were damaged during the launch of the shuttle into space by foam. No one knew how bad the damage was until it disintegrated. Edit: some are disagreeing with my final sentence because there were some engineers concerned about the foam during launch who thought additional photographs should be taken to confirm any damage or lack thereof, which were not in fact taken. I'm still standing by my statement because while this was definitely a flaw that NASA management downplayed any potential risks, there's no evidence that anyone knew the thing was gonna burn up on re-entry or that this was a potential mode of failure, and it's more like they should have had methods in place to see this was a serious potential risk. More info here. Even if they had, there are serious questions as to whether the crew could have been saved, because real life is not a Hollywood film. NASA concluded in 2003 it wasn't possible, and even the best potential plan sounds pretty wild. Link with more info. This photo of Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who wrote the lyrics and music respectively for The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. In this photo they had just won Oscars for The Little Mermaid. That night Ashman told Menken they needed to have a serious talk when they got back to New York, and when they got back a couple days later, Ashman told Menken he had AIDS and was going to die. They had been songwriter partners for over a decade and were in the middle of working on Beauty and the Beast. So it looks like a happy photo of two men achieving their wildest dream, but it's really a record of the last normal moment they had together. And while Menken is all smiles, if you look closely at Ashman you can tell something's wrong. https://n.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/file partially reflected plutonium sphere.jpg https://n.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/demon_core number/media/file %3 The demon core was a 6.2 kg sphere of plutonium which was manufactured during the Manhattan Project. The core was involved in two criticality accidents. In the first accident, Henry Dacklian accidentally dropped a tungsten carbide brick onto the core and caused it to go into supercriticality, exposing him to a lethal dose of radiation that killed him 25 days later. In the second accident, the scientists ignored protocols and used a screwdriver instead of shims to prevent the two beryllium spheres surrounding the core that were used in the experiment. If these two spheres closed completely, the core would have gone supercritical. One day, while performing this experiment, Louis Slotin was demonstrating this technique to his peers before leaving Los Alamos. His screwdriver slipped a fraction of an inch, and the spheres completely sealed the core, causing it to go supercritical. A burst of neutron radiation was released for an estimated half a second. Slotin ended up dead 9 days later and his peer survived but died 20 years later due to a heart attack. I had to leave out a lot of details to keep this short, but there is more info here. https://n.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/demon_core. I'm from Belgium, and every Belgian knows about this photo of Julie and Melissa. Worst is, I'm from the small city where that happened. I was born barely 20 days after that happened. Here's the wiki. In 1995, the two young girls aged 8.5 and 9 years old disappear. Their bodies are found 1 year later, buried 4 meters deep. They were abducted and kept in Marc Dutroux's basement. He fed them himself and raped them. Marc Dutroux got arrested for stealing a truck, which got him 4 months of prison. During that time he tasked his wife and an accomplice, Bernard Weinstein, which Marc murdered later, with feeding the girls, which she did not dare to do. She only fed her dogs and left the girls to starve. When Marc Dutroux got out of prison, the girls were sat on raw planks by the floor. One of the girls told him that she hadn't drunk anything in 4 days. He made both girls drink a glass of water, drop by drop. Julie died some time later. He stored her body in a plastic bag in a freezer. He told Melissa that her friend was at the hospital to give her hope, brought her some food to make her eat, which she could barely do. He went to bed, and when he woke up, Melissa was dead. He then proceeded to bury them in his backyard. Unfortunately, those 2 girls aren't the only ones that guy raped and murdered. He's still in prison to this day and I hope he never comes out. Edit, grammar. Not really a picture, but this meme. I went to high school with this guy. About 2 months prior, 2 women, 18 and 36 years old, went missing after a St. Patrick's Day party. This guy had been sharing posts to help find them. A week or so after he shared this meme, he was arrested, along with a few others, for kidnapping and murdering the women. They were in his custody and still alive at the time he made this post, according to official police timelines. Edit, redundancy. Edit to clarify, the women went missing in March and this dude, plus a couple friends, held them captive in a trailer for 2 months, while police were searching. After 2 months of being detained, the women were killed. This meme looks to be posted either the day of or days before he killed them. Edit 3, here's a DOJ report regarding the case. There are a few details I left out intentionally. A man had been murdered after an argument over $40 of drugs and his body was disposed of the next state over. The guys involved in the murder took the 2 women captive since they had been witnesses. Here is a local article, and another here. 2 trains are involved here. There was an eastbound and westbound train. One train appears to have already been passing the girls and you don't see that train in the photo. The girls were standing in between 2 sets of tracks. If I found the right location, there is a bend in the track which probably made seeing the upcoming train harder. Add in the noise of the train next to them and that horn was probably hard to hear but also hard to distinguish where it was coming from. The second train passed them and this is where tragedy unfolded. Either the turbulence between the trains caused them to panic and they ended up getting hit, or they got hit by one train which then threw them at the other. I only found one article describing the details. I worked as a freight conductor for a Class 1 railroad. Every single day there was a close call. Not one day passed that I was out doing my job that I didn't see somebody jumping under, over, or through a moving train. Not a single day passed when I was in the cab that I did not see a person drive around the gate and sometimes narrowly miss getting hit. Even people on bicycles. The one incident I saw a guy looked right at me, our train was stopped waiting for northbound traffic, and drove around the lowered crossing gate, still looking at me, and was immediately hit and killed by the northbound train. It dragged the car into our locomotive and rolled it in between the south and northbound trains. The conductor from the other train and I couldn't see the occupant in the vehicle and we had to wait for first responders. Those gates are down for a reason, folks. There is absolutely nothing train crews can do to save you. Only minimize the distance of the mess you made. https://mguru.com/t/edmund_Fitzgerald/B8R08W9. This picture was taken several months before the ship would go down with all 29 men. There was another ship about 10 miles behind the SS Edmund Fitzgerald called the SS Arthur M. Anderson. The Fitzgerald contacted the Arthur M. Anderson saying that their radars were down and asked the Arthur M. Anderson to inform them of anything on their radars. At about 3 p.m. the captain of the Fitzgerald, Captain Ernest M. McSorley, told the Arthur M. Anderson the Fitzgerald started to list to the starboard side and that one of their fence rails were down and 2 vent covers were missing. At about 4 o'clock the Fitzgerald contacted the Anderson telling them that their radars were down, and asked the Anderson to give them position updates. At 6:40 p.m. the Anderson was hit by 2 huge waves, 35 feet waves in quick succession. At 7:10 the Anderson contacted the Fitzgerald asking how they were doing and Captain Ernest M. McSorley told them we are holding out on. Shortly after that transmission the Fitzgerald disappeared off the Anderson's radar. The Anderson contacted the Coast Guard after they made to safety and was asked to go back out and look for survivors, but all they found was debris and a life raft with no one in it. The Fitzgerald was found 4 days later at the bottom of Lake Superior. No bodies were recovered. There was also a song written about the event by Gordon Lightfoot called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I don't have it to show anyone, but during the last week of my freshman year of high school, I brought a video camera to school to film my friends and I for fun. The senior class was practicing for graduation, where to walk, where to sit, how to come to the stage for their diploma, etc., in the gym. So our gym teacher just had us sit on the bleachers and watch them /chat. Basically a free period. I got bored, so I filmed some of the seniors rehearsing, including this one guy who I'd known pretty much all my life. He was the definition of a gentle giant. Tall as hell and built like a linebacker, but very kind and would always protect people he saw being bullied. All around great guy. 2 days later, during senior skip day, senior class skipped school and met up at a nearby park for a big picnic /last hurrah together. Local tradition, a group of the senior boys decided to hop into 2 separate cars for a race. I live in the mountains of West Virginia, and mountainous, curvy as hell, poorly maintained roads are not safe even at the best of times, but while speeding, dangerous as fuck. The 2 cars reach a set of train tracks and a train is coming. One car makes it across before the train, but the other has to wait for it to pass. It does, and they hurry up catch up with the first car. And then they see it. The first car had taken a curve too quickly and went sliding over a hill before wrapping around a tree. The driver lost an arm and a leg, one of the passengers suffered severe brain trauma and was left, just about the closest to a vegetable you can be without actually being one, and the other was our gentle giant. He didn't make it. Did I mention that the twin of the brain-damaged boy was in the second car and was the one who found them? Did I mention that our gentle giant came from an abusive home, so his grandmother had taken him in and raised him, and he had learning difficulties and she just wanted to see him graduate high school and he died mere days before graduation? They buried him in his cap and gown. As far as I know, I have the last footage of him alive, somewhere on a tape. I have the last footage of the twin before his life changed forever. The last of the driver with all his limbs. I still think of him and cry, wishing he'd gotten to graduate, knowing his grandmother was so proud of him, knowing that he was one of the kindest, gentlest men I've ever known, despite coming from a background of so much pain. Knowing that it could have made him angry, made him the bully, and instead it just made him determined to never let anyone go through what he did. Anyway, I only rewatched that video once. I couldn't bear to look at it again. I was 26 when this happened and my son was 5 months old. I work on an army base, and was at my desk about to start my morning routine of reading the news when I noticed that no websites would load. Somebody told us they thought something really bad had happened in New York, so a group of us walked to the cafeteria to watch the TV. A cafeteria full of people in utter silence trying to comprehend what we were seeing, and then the loudspeaker announced we were shutting down and everyone had to go home. I picked my son up from daycare, and watched CNN the rest of the day. I remember feeling so gutted, not just at what was happening, but because I knew what the response would be and that my son wouldn't grow up in the world I wanted him to. We were home for about a week, and when we went back, there were armed guards at the gates, with military K9s and soldiers in Bradleys pointing guns at us as we filed in. I've never had a gun pointed at me, and never thought I'd have one pointed at me just trying to go to work. It could take 5 hours just to get in the gate. People would start lining up at 5 a.m. Everything changed that day. Not just the fire and the temperature, but the smoke. I once burned a bag of popcorn, put it on 20 minutes instead of 2 minutes, it cooked about 4 or 5 minutes. The whole house filled with smoke, everyone was couching, eyes irritated, we had to leave the house to let the smoke dissipate. For 10 minutes or so afterwards, if we coughed, some smoke came out. All that from a small bag of popcorn being cooked a bit too long. The smoke from an airplane crash and subsequent fire must have made it impossible to breathe or see. There are photos from the top floor with the windows open and people hanging out, and the smoke pouring out is so dense and so much of it. In fact, looking at those photos, I wonder if all of them jumped or simply fell leaning out the window for some fresh air. Tons of people panicked and desperate to breathe, pushing each other to get to the outside. Whether they jumped or fell or a little of both, I don't know. But either way, what choice did they have? I still remember seeing them on the news and thinking I had to be seeing it wrong, that it was pieces of the structure or something falling. It just didn't seem real that people thought that was their best option. I was a sophomore in high school at the time and school admin were arguing all day if teachers should leave it on for us as it was history unfolding before our eyes, or turn it off so as to not traumatize us. Most teachers just covered their door window that you could see in from the hall, asked the class what we wanted and typically had it on. We didn't want to see the travesty, but wanted to try to understand what was happening. And while it wasn't a top thought of the day, I still remember being terrified at the thought of, oh shit, this means we're going to war. How many of these seniors I know are going to be drafted?